peeps. One thing that is so important that you want to make sure that you're doing before actually consuming, drying, and smoking, or however you consume your bud, is flushing. Why is it so important?
Because the fertilizer you're using is actually going through the plant, and it actually stays there for a while. Like the plant will feed on it, but it's not like eating and digesting it right away. It kind of stays there, and there's trace elements that stay for a little while. So you want to flush it so you get the taste and like all those chemicals out.
So this kind of leaves a lasting taste. That all of these nutrients leave a taste in the plant. So
if they're not flushed well, yeah.
If they're not flushed well. And flushing is literally as simple as watering your plant with just nothing in it. So if you're already just watering your plant without any added nutrients, that's of course fine. You've already been flushing. You don't need to flush any excess nutrients that are stuck within the plant. So you won't really have to do that. But let's talk about this product here, Flawless Finish, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, well, it's a flushing agent. So you use it once or twice right before your flush. So after your overdrive, you basically, it's 1 or 2 waterings if it's not raining, and then it just kind of degrades whatever's left and makes it easier for the plant to absorb. So once you do your flush, and at the end, most or 99% of the chemicals you put in throughout your row are gone.
Okay. That's awesome. So you want to just use this a couple days before you, then eventually everyone should be just flushing fully with water, and that's going to really remove a lot of those nutrients that are stuck within the plant. It also gives a smoother smoke, is that right?
Yeah.
It helps to smooth it out?
A lot, yeah.
Okay, so that's definitely really key. I would say I didn't do that consciously last year. I was watering, as I mentioned, without any added nutrients. But that's a really good point. So you do want to make sure, for those of you who are first-time growers at home, if you've been using any of the nutrients that we've been providing, whether they were the refertilizer nutrients or the advanced nutrients, you do want to make sure that you're doing this flushing step, and that's so, so important. So you'll be doing that a couple days before you go to crop. Is that right?
Well, this will be about 2 days before the 2-week flush. So 2 weeks of water.
2 weeks of water.
And then, so right before your 2 weeks of water, and after your 2 weeks of water, you can cut usually.
Perfect. I love it. Super important. I highly recommend the Flawless Finish. You can pick that up here, of course, at Teragenic Solutions. Okay, so we're going to get into trimming. I'm so excited about this because last year, I can't even tell you how long it took me to trim my 2 plants, and they weren't even like that crazy big. But I definitely didn't know what I was doing. So I'm sure that Phil here is going to be able to give us some tips and tricks, not only on the right shears to be using. Already the pair of shears that I picked up from here have been life-changing, even for just my plants at home. They're just really long, skinny, needle nose kind of shears, and they also have a curve to them for getting into those hard to reach spots on your stem when it comes to trimming. So let's see what we have here. We're going to talk about wet versus dry trimming. So last year I trimmed wet. And what that basically means, the difference between the two is, a wet branch, something that's been freshly cut. This was trimmed about 2 hours ago, so it's kind of starting to wilt a bit. It's definitely a lot easier to trim when it's still got that turgor pressure in the plant cells. But Philippe here had mentioned to me not too long ago that actually trimming dry is the way to go. So this has been a miraculous realization for me. So we're going to show you guys a demonstration on how to best trim your crop. We're going to show you wet versus dry and some of the tools that we recommend for using during the trimming process. So let's talk about this. Let's maybe start with our wet branches. So we both have our own here. And you see these big, what I found so interesting was learning about these big fan leaves. And for those of you who don't know what a fan leaf is, they're those big, beautiful, picturesque leaves that are on a cannabis plant. And essentially, these are like the powerhouse tool for the plant. It's absorbing all of that energy from the sun. It's promoting photosynthesis, and that's basically where the plant is getting a lot of its energy from. Is that right?
Yep, pretty much.
So you want to definitely trim away all of your fan leaves as one of the first things. Why don't you take it from here? What would you suggest? Step one, you cut off your branch. You've got this. Where are we going from here with a wet branch?
Well, you don't necessarily need your scissors right away. You can. So you can actually go and just chop it off. But if it's just for the families, it is easy to just, you have it here and just kind of.
Just to pull them. Yeah,
and
for
it's
sure.
gone.
Why not?
A lot of people use machines. Should I talk about the wilting now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so like she mentioned, these were cut about 2 hours ago. If you're going to, specifically if you're going to use a machine, even if you're doing by hand, this is not fun. This will not be pleasant completely to trim because they're all wilty and all sticky, and all your scissors and your hands will all get gummy, and it won't be as easy to trim. So especially if you're doing a machine, only cut when you can trim for the next hour to make sure it's always fresh and tight so the leaves can easily be taken out.
Okay, right. That was another thing that I remember so vividly last year when I was trimming, having no idea at all what I was doing, was just how many pairs of scissors I went through. They just became like glued closed almost. Because I mean, those trichomes is what makes it that sticky icky. They get sticky on your scissors. So definitely, it gets in the way for sure.
Yep.
So once you're kind of at this point, what is the best way to kind of like, are you wanting to remove all these individual buds? Or are you just trying to get rid of the big leaves, like the big fan leaves mostly? That's kind of like your step one.
Well, it all depends. Well, your step one is the fan leaves, and it all depends how you want to dry. If you want to hang them, so meaning just put a rope and just kind of, hang them. Or if you actually want to put them on racks. So
that's what I did last year. I put mine on racks, but apparently it's better to hang upside down.
Yeah, because they do keep growing for a couple of days, and all the trichomes and all the crystal pop out, and these do keep going.
How cool is that? They literally will still keep growing after a few days after you cut them. So the advantage to hanging them upside down is just to allow them to grow.
Yep.
More uniformly, and the bottom buds will be a lot more concentrated. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's so cool. I love that.
Well, we keep going here just fast. These are really premature, so it'll be a little harder to show you what it's supposed to be trimmed like because they're early, but that's okay.
Is there anything that you would recommend doing with these fan leaves? Like, is this just something that you kind of compost? I've heard of people putting these in your smoothies, making bombs out of them. Anything that you've done in the past with these, or you just kind of compost this?
Compost fire.
Compost fire. Okay, I like that. That works. One suggestion that I had heard over our Instagram was someone had recommended that the smaller leaves that, still have a little bit of crystal on them, still cutting those and saving them because they do have that THC compound that most people are after. And they used those leaves for their butters, their oils, for kind of making like an edible, essentially, option there. So that's something you can take into consideration too. All right. Let's talk about the dry trimming, because this is what you recommend, right? Or are we still working on this?
Well, we can work on this 2 seconds more.
Okay, I like it.
So we do have racks, but basically if you don't hang it, you want to go under, and you want to make sure that this is why it's not going to look terrific, because it's not at its full potential yet and it's really small. But basically you want to take off everything. And she is right, the little leaves that still have crystal on it, you can transform it into butter or candy or hash. A lot of bubble hash are made from there. If you don't actually want to use your big nugs for hash and bubble hash, you can actually just keep those little ones. And while you're drying this on a rack, you can have another complete rack to have.
It's going so fast, I love it. Bang.
So it should be bigger, but mind you, this is the way it should look. It should be close enough. A lot of little leaves that will be coming through, while they dry, they will go into the bud. But basically, you have a little bud, and you can do that to your whole plant. Obviously, if you have a machine, it's a lot easier. And then you can throw it on a drying rack, which we'll show you, I guess, later.
Yeah, we'll show you guys the drying racks later when we get to drying. Our fingers are already so sticky. His looks a little bit more manicured than mine. I'm still working on my technique. Yeah, you can tell that they're definitely not mature enough.
Oh, no,
they're quite
not
small.
Ready. Yeah.
That's okay.
And by the way, guys, the stickiness, if you do a lot, this is the golden hash. People love this. If you can scrape your hands, People say it's dirt, but it's not. It's just fully crystallized hash on your fingers. So if you can actually make a small ball, it is the best hash you'll ever get.
There you go. All the hash enjoyers out there. That's how you do it.
Yeah.
Okay, I like it. Sorry, I'm like getting excited about that big dry branch that you have over there because it's just amazing. So we've got a big dry branch here that is ready to go. Yeah, go for it.
Here, I always want to speak with you.
Oh, okay.
Like,
I don't even know how to begin with this thing. It apparently is a lot easier. So why is it easier? For trimming, doing all those little fine details when your actual plant is dry.
Well, as you can see, this plant was actually hung without taking any of the families off either. So it was literally cut and hung upside down, and everything dried from the fan leaves to the little leaves to the actual bud. This branch was dried at 40%. And this is crucial for a lot of people right now outside because of the mold, because of our weather, there's a lot of humidity. So if you bring your humidity in your room at 40% instead of 60, and I know a lot of people will say 50, 60, but you can always bring back the humidity in your weed, but you can never take away mold.
Good point. And mold is a killer. It will completely ruin your crop. So any opportunity that you have to, okay.
So I will let
60% humidity.
Yes.
And for here we have an interesting tool, the canna brush that you were showing me earlier. This is apparently makes your life so much easier if you are trimming a dry branch. So I'm just gonna go for it.
Oh yeah, take the big one.
Okay. Oh my gosh, this thing is huge. So what exactly is this doing?
It's basically breaking off all the little leaves that are around the bud.
Wow, this is so easy. This is so easy.
And it's doing a decent job too.
That's
I've never
not
used this before. Closer, there's different hardness for the little orange parts.
Wow, this is awesome. This is totally awesome. Basically what this is doing is it's removing all of those larger leaves that don't have any crystals on them. Instead of having to go through and individually kind of cut all of them out when the branch is wet, this is just so much easier. If you didn't have something like this and instead you were using your shears, you would then just kind of be going in and trimming them away one by one. It's a tedious, but it's a therapeutic action as well. It's kind of relaxing to do.
Well, what's fun at 40% to humidity and that you can't do at 50 or 60 is you can cut, but it's the same as a branch.
Scrape it with your hands. Wow, look at that.
And it kind of finishes. And after that, you can always, like I said, rehumidify it. Some will say you can lose a lot of trichomes, but most of them are stuck on the bud and they won't leave. Plus, you can keep whatever you're losing here and make hash or cooking like we were saying earlier.
Yeah.
So once you
because I was going to mention that. I was saying there's, hairs and little leaves that definitely have trichomes that are falling down and off, but you just save that.
Yeah.
Yeah. For those of you who don't like to waste, I certainly don't like wasting anything. So that's how you go about kind of using every single last piece.
Yeah. So
very, very cool.
After you're done, and you can, again, throwing on a rack and bring up the humidity a bit. It is a bit too dry right now.
That is way better looking than these guys. But this is also a lot more close-up of this later for you guys to see up close. But the color difference is so obvious. Like this is nice, bright green, where this has really got some orange hues to it. And a little bit of purple in there too. So knowing your strain, also very important, right?
It helps a lot.
Yeah. It helps a lot with knowing what to expect, knowing how long the flowering cycle is, all of those sort of things. We have a question. Bryn Marine, how do you recommend regulating humidity? Great question.
Well, honestly, it's not too hard. There's a lot of expensive equipment, but if you have a humidifier and a dehumidifier, put it into your washroom, just as the smallest room you can make and make it fit so you're not using too much energy, obviously, and just regulate your humidifier and dehumidifier at a 40 first, and then when you're ready to rehumidify it, put both in at 55, and it'll go back up. Leave it about 12 hours when you want to rehumidify it. It'll take probably a week to dehumidify.
And how long typically, we're going to get into this next, of course, the drying stage, which typically would come, before trimming if you were to be cutting a dry branch. But let's talk about drying. So when it comes to drying, how long typically are you recommending your bud, you're leaving your bud to dry? A week, longer?
It's usually a week and a half.
Mm-hmm.
It all depends, again, humidity. If you're drying at 60%, which people say is a little better, but if you're going again outside in this region, I go directly to 40 just to make sure you knock out all that like mold that might be coming through.
Yeah.
So probably a week and a half at 40%, and then it should be good. And you can always rehumidify it. So even if you leave it 2 weeks, as long as you take care of it and put it back afterwards, it's okay.
Okay. So, and also when you're drying, when you're choosing the right place to dry your flower, you want to be drying this in a dark space. Is that right?
Yes.
Because sunlight damages THC. How does that work exactly?
That's a terrific question. I'll find out one day. No, but it does affect it. So light, sunlight, or just normal light will affect it. You do want to dry it in a dark place.
A dark, cool space, having a dehumidifier, which I have in my space that I'll be drying in, is exactly what you want. You want a dehumidifier, and you want to make sure that you're drying it in a dark space. Have some fans, have some circulation. The last thing that you want is for mold to start forming, because as soon as mold, especially gray mold, we were talking about that earlier, starts anywhere, you're done for. It's a very sad and quick and sadly easy way to ruin your crop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of these drying materials that you have. Let's kind of move some of these things down here. So when it comes to drying, this product I thought was so interesting and cool. Of course, you're able to hang these upside down. You can tie off the top and just hang them. I've seen people essentially doing like the clothesline effect, where you kind of have a line and basically hang the branches just down the line there and hang them upside down. Or what I did last year, because I didn't know what I was doing, but I figured it out, is I just had like big screen doors kind of propped up, and I had all of my branches just drying on these screen doors, which had the perfect effect, more or less. It got the job done. But this is really interesting. This is called Stack It. And essentially the material is made of, you know, those laundry bins that pop open? That's kind of what this is, but it's a tiered stacking holder. So you've got, you know, leveled, tiered, sectional pieces where you can lay out, and yeah.
It's gonna go.
It's gonna pop. Look at this thing.
So,
It's huge. Woo!
and it's made to hang like here, and then it just kind of, actually they might already be.
Oh, perfect. But yeah, you get the idea. Little pieces that all connect. That's a really cool tool. As soon as, when I first came in here and saw the store, I was like, that is genius, because now I don't have all this surface area taken up by these big screen doors. This is a great way to dry a lot in a small amount of space, you know, more or less. Okay, let's kind of move down some of these more things here. So we've talked about drying about a week to a week and a half that you want to spend drying. Are we going to be adding any sort of topical stuff onto our leaves? You really just want to leave it, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you're drying at 40% and you want to bring it back up after, you will need a screen. Because once you get here, like, you should be cleaning all your branches to the same spot. So they basically, you'll only end up having little balls which are completely clean. And then when you want to dry it back, well, you can't hang this. You need to put it on a screen.
Right.
So you'll have, again, more. It'll be nicer. Well, this is a bottom bud, but basically if you take a top bud, I'm going a bit fast.
Yeah.
Basically, so now you have your nice bud that's trimmed.
You did that so fast because it's bone dry. Like, what a difference that makes. Last year when I was going through with the wet branch, it took me ages. And this, look how quickly he was able to pull together this nice beefy bud just using his fingers. That's lovely. It smells amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. smells almost like blueberries. Woo! I love it. Okay, so we're going to talk about how to store and cure your cannabis because that's super important. We talked about humidity. We're going to talk about safe ways to store, some simple ways to go about doing that, and some curing methods too, and just some different ways that you can go about doing that. So let's talk about storing. Now, this is kind of a traditional way that I think most people go about is just having a mason jar at home, right? Something like this. But let's talk about managing the humidity within these. Okay. Because sometimes I find, maybe you're putting in your bud and it's too dry and you're finding that it's remaining too dry, or maybe it's too moist. And then a couple days later, you look inside and it's covered in mold because there are a few pieces in there that weren't dry enough, and now your whole jar is ruined. Yikes! Yeah. That's a scary moment for people. It would be for me too. It's like, oh my God, my beautiful jar is ruined. So there are some really cool products out there that you guys can use. The Bovita hydration packs. These guys too. They're two-way hydration packs. You can kind of see them inside my container here, but basically what these packs do is they help to remove excess moisture and also will introduce moisture to your bud if it's too dry or too moist. So chucking a couple of these into your mason jar, easy breezy. These are also included in our giveaway packs. Very, very cool. You can pick those up here as well. But let's talk about just drying and curing now. Now let's say, okay, we finally have gotten to this point. Yes. Can you enjoy this now? Oh yeah. It's ready to enjoy. There's nothing else that people need to do. No. Perfect. But let's say, you want to save it. You have a whole lot. I mean, this is literally still from last year, so much. Do you need to worry about freezing? What are some methods or techniques that you recommend doing for if you want to kind of store your bud for a long period of time?
Well, you can always freeze it. A lot of people do that. But okay, as long as, like her jar from last year, as long as it's sealed away from oxygen, because oxygen degrades THC also and CBD, and same as light. So if you keep it sealed and it's dry enough so it won't mold, you can keep it for a long time. That will, like you said, you kept that from last year. So in a dark spot.
That's exactly it. I kept it in a drawer, sealed, safe, ready to go. But what about these bags that you have here? These were so cool when you first showed them to me. I was like, this is awesome.
So these are new bags that came out this year. They're called Grover bags. This is the big one, but it'll be easier to explain with a small one. So in here, they have little holes. It's two-way holes. So basically, they're supposed to keep the right humidity inside these bags. So around 55, 60%.
Oh, sweet.
So you put your weed in.
It kind of does the work for you.
Yes.
Okay.
It's always, again, it is a plastic bag. It's always better to be a bit drier than a bit wetter to make sure you don't get mold. It's a big issue. But once that's done, this will cure it for you. So it's like aging wine. You'll get the terpenes, the smell, the taste will come out. The terpenes will show a bit more. They'll be more prevalent.
Okay, so these kind of help to bring out the terpene flavors and that scent, that aroma, which is so cool. Yeah. So cool. And that's how important it is for the curing and drying process. Yeah. Is you really want to maintain and save those terps. That's where you get a lot of your flavors from, a lot of that aroma that is associated with cannabis. And if you don't go about drying or curing or storing your cannabis the right way, then you lose all of those delicious, important, tasty terpenes, right? Okay. I really like these. These are so cool. I mean, having a bag like this is basically a pillowcase. This is a pillow.
Yeah.
That's like how much can you fit in here?
A pound dry.
A pound dry. And how much does one approximately outdoor plant yield?
It depends on the size, but mostly I guess if you planted late April, it would be 6 feet tall. You can usually get 2.5 pounds of plant.
Whoa. Dry.
Yes, dry.
That's the other thing too that I really noticed and learned last year, again, when I didn't know what I was doing, was I was cutting these big, beautiful branches off of my plant, and like I was like, oh my gosh, these freaking buds are massive. And then after 2, 3, 4 days, once they had dried out, they kind of lose about half their size.
2/3.
2/3 their size. Okay.
Yeah, it's first time it happened to me, I almost cried too. It was like it's so big, and then it's where did it go?
And what is happening there?
Well, it's a plant, so when you're taking out the humidity,
It's dehydrating.
Yeah, basically,
Mhm.
like any fruits or leaves outside or bananas.
Yeah,
not bananas.
like a nice ripe juicy tomato or a sun-dried tomato. Essentially, that's kind of what you have to think about.
Yeah.
So we did have a question, which was a really good question, is are these bags reusable? Can you use them time after time?
Yes.
The functionality doesn't change no matter how many times you use it, or?
Well, in general, no, if you want, because they are sealable. If you seal it, obviously you cut it open, then you won't be able to reseal it, but as a bag in itself, yes.
And these help to keep the smell in as well, right?
Yes.
They're completely sealant of the scent.
Yes.
It's pretty awesome. Nice, I like that a lot. So yes, they are reusable. Let's talk about some of the hazards or the big no-nos for people at home who are, wanting to make sure that they don't mess this up. What are some of the big things that people should be looking out for?
One of them is usually done a little earlier than this. It's make sure you clean the inside of your plant. So everything that's not going to really give you anything because they're not getting sunlight, so they're not going to give bud. Mm-hmm. But they're also stopping the wind and breathing from the plant, and that can cause a lot of mildew and mold.
Powdery mildew, mold.
So you want to make sure the inside of your plant is mainly aerated. So you can actually take even small buds that you kind of know won't give you anything. You can rip all that out and just make sure that and plus it'll make sure that the energy goes to your bigger buds, so the top buds will be a bit bigger. So it's a win-win in itself.
Amazing, amazing. I'm gonna just cut to our audience, whoever's tuning in right now, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook, I'm gonna ask you guys a question. What are you growing this year? Do you know what strains? Type in the comments what strains you are growing or what strains maybe you're interested in growing, and we are going to choose our first winner for our giveaway. So we'll leave you open to that and we'll continue chatting, but that is your first opportunity to win one of our awesome Grow Good Weed kits, our Grow Good Weed bags. So let's hear it. What are you guys growing? I'm personally growing, clones that Philippe had given me. Great White Shark, which is my spirit animal. So exciting. Granddaddy Perp and Gorilla Glue. And Green Crack.
Peach Fuel.
Peach Fuel.
Yeah.
Okay, I actually didn't know that until right now. I'm still learning. Peach Fuel, I like that. Okay, so those are what I'm growing. I'm really excited about just the difference in strains and the variations to see how they taste, how they smell, and just also how they look. I can definitely see the difference between the three strains. And what is this question? Louise, Green Crack. Yes, we have another Green Crack grower. I'm also growing Green Crack. I started it from seed as opposed to the clones. And it's so much smaller than the rest of my plants, but I also started it so late. I had it in the wrong container, so it was stunted. It's honestly about this big. It's so small. Michelle is growing White Widow.
I love that genetic. It's an old school genetic, which is amazing to grow in this region. And I haven't heard it for a while, but it's a terrific.
It sounds badass. It sounds totally badass. Does it have any like phenotypic traits, like visual traits that kind of have given it that name?
I don't really know. I know it's mostly an outdoor strain. It was bred to go outdoors, but it's an easy strain to grow outdoor, and it has a nice outdoory without being too swaggy taste.
Okay.
So it's
So you've got yourself a good one there, Michelle. You're definitely one of our winners. So please make sure to DM us or we'll reach out to you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more back to things that we do not want people doing. Oh, we've got another one coming in. Anna is growing Northern Lights.
I've never grown that, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, I've heard of it too. I feel like Northern Lights and Aurora Borealis is like a very common one that I've heard.
Yeah.
Never tried it myself either, but those are awesome. Also another winner. Thank you for responding. One thing that you mentioned to me, which was such a good point for those of you who are growing outdoors, even if you're growing indoors, is the importance of using organic pesticides.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got mites on your plants, if you've got any of those bad buggies, you know, a lot of people probably tend to pick up that End All Safers insecticidal soap, which I use on all of my indoor house plants. I just picked this up here about a week ago because I'm battling thrips on my indoor plants. This is not stuff that you want to be using on your plants within how long of a time frame before you crop?
Let's be honest here, the flowers will stay for the entire crop. After you start seeing flowers, whatever you spray on them will probably stay on.
Maintain it. You'll keep it.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point. Is you know, whatever you're putting on your flower, you are ingesting in some way, shape, or form. So you really want to stay away from any harsh chemicals that you're going to be putting on those plants. So what are some great other options that people can use for battling, you know, mildew, mold, bad bugs? I, as you guys know, have a praying mantis family living in my backyard, and I was supposed to bring one of them in, but she was not showing her face, so I didn't bring her. But I gotta tell you, the difference from last year to this year in how clean my plants are, like there's barely even a nibble taken out of a single leaf, and it's because of this praying mantis. She owns this freaking cannabis like sanctuary that she lives in, and there's no bugs. It's been amazing. No aphids, no spiders, no mites, no nothing. So of course I'm a huge advocate for beneficial insects. Those are probably the #1 go-to for managing those types of pests.
Especially inside. Well, I don't know if you guys noticed earlier, but this little sachet is a Swarovski sachet. It was from it. This also is an indoor plant. So there is a reason it looks also a little different, and it went to maturity. But basically, yeah, this is a Swarovski. There's Californicus. We have contacts with different bug suppliers. So basically, yeah, you
can get those here as well.
Yeah.
And basically what this is, people are looking at these little satchel thinking like, what do you mean those are beneficial insects? They're tiny, tiny predatory mites. And essentially you can't really see them. It might look just like dust that's on your plants, but those predatory mites are taking care of those aphids. They're taking care of those thrips, whitefly, a lot of those bad insects that can completely devastate your outdoor and indoor crop, but you do have more control over indoor grows. You're not really dealing with that as much. Is that right?
It's a lot easier to control indoor than outdoor.
It's a lot easier because you have more control over all, like you have control over the light, you have control over the water. It rains outside, you don't have control over that. So you're able to manage a lot more of the elements that go into growing when you're growing indoors. So of course we're talking mostly about outdoor growing. I'm going to be trying my hand at indoor, so you guys can follow along with that whole adventure as it unravels. But yeah, so those are some differences between the indoor and outdoor. Other big hazardous things that people want to stay away from. Really the mold is what's most important. It is so key for you guys to take note of what humidity level you are drying your bud in. Some people are probably thinking, oh, I'll just throw it in my garage, I'll dry it outside, and it never dries because you don't have high enough, or you have too high of a humidity in that space. So maybe it's time to invest in a dehumidifier, something along those lines.
Yeah.
Perfect. Perfect. What was the other thing? Oh, this stuff here.
This is, it goes with that bottle.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically when you have...
Natural cleaner.
Yeah, this is, you can, well, I wouldn't drink it, but basically you wouldn't die, which is not bad. So... We like that.
We like that. So it's got to be okay for you. Enzymes, natural cleaner. Okay. Yep.
Yes.
Cool.
So if you have powdery mildew, this is hydrogen peroxide. It's a little lower in percentage than what you get at a drugstore.
Okay.
But basically you mix both together. There is a recipe, and then you can put that on. It is safe. Again, you can ingest it. Again, this is just a bit of peroxide. So if you transform it or smoke it, it'll be a fine for you, and it'll at least stop. Or if you want to start earlier in your crop, prevent powdery mildew and any other kind of mold.
Mm-hmm.
This probably won't help that much with gray mold, but at least it'll help a bit and stunt it from going through. But again, you can put this near the end and it will be safe for consumption.
Amazing, amazing. That's, I mean, what I did last year, as I was trimming my branches. I'm looking closer and I'm noticing all the mites, all the aphids, all the little just insects. Of course, I was growing outside. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do about these on here? Like, I need to get them off, but there were so many. I, of course, feared for any sort of cross-contamination of them getting inside and messing with my indoor plants. So I kind of made kind of like a homemade concoction, which was kind of a disaster. It did end up working, but I had all these pails. One pail was like lemon juice and peroxide. Another pail was like vinegar and something else. I don't know. This was a Google search before I really dove into how to properly grow cannabis. So this is a really nice alternative, and it's good to know that it exists. It's good to know that there is something, there is a method for you to use at home that is safe and clean for your plants to helping to deal with these issues. Yeah, for sure. So we are going to open up the chat to any questions that people might have. I remember at our first Grow Good Weed workshop that we did digitally, we had so many questions come in, so many amazing questions. So we're going to open up the floor. If you have any questions at all that you'd like to ask our expert Philippe here, we'll also be pulling a couple other names from any questions that come through for our draw for our prize packages. So please, if you are wanting to learn more about growing outdoors, growing indoors, of course, we will be doing another workshop probably in the new year that will talk a little bit more about growing indoors and some tips there as I kind of dive into that adventure. We'll see how that goes. But if you do want to come and check out Teragenic Solutions, this store is out of control amazing. They have everything and more. They've got a whole section for cloning. If you want to try your hand at cloning, we're a little bit too far now for all your outdoor growers because basically as soon as your plant flowers, you can't clone, right?
You shouldn't be cloning when it's flowering, no.
You shouldn't be cloning when it's flowering. So many new things that I am learning, which is just so awesome. I love it. But there is something for everyone in here if you're looking to fit up a space for indoor grow. If you're looking to even just boost your outdoor garden or your indoor plants, they have worm castings here. They have all types of organic fertilizers that are great for whatever it is that you're growing. It doesn't have to be cannabis, but they basically are your one-stop shop for everything that you need, even just, pest control. I was so excited when I saw this here 2 weeks ago. I was like, I'm literally dealing with this right now, and the Sapers ain't doing it. This has really actually been working so well on my thrips. And they just are out of control. I seem to look at another plant in my house. I'm like, oh, now you're here. Oh, great. Thank you so much. You've moved over here. Okay, great. Spray them, spray. So it's a never ending battle with indoor mites and bad bugs. But this has been a nice new one that I've been trying out. So yeah, it's good for all of the things. Lace bugs, aphids, cutworms. So amazing. We also will be able to answer your questions throughout the next couple hours. So if you're watching this a little bit delayed, we had some technical issues earlier on, and you do have questions, you can absolutely slide into our DMs, either on Facebook or Instagram, even on YouTube, and we can answer them for you. We are going to answer this question here. Drying inside tips on reducing smell indoors. Really good question. Really good question from Louise. Thanks, Louise.
So there's some good news and some bad news.
What do we want first? The bad news? Okay, we'll go with the bad news first.
It's sweet and it smells a lot.
Shock.
But the good news is
it smells good.
Okay, that's true good news. Yeah, it does smell good.
Really good.
But the main part, if you drop it down to, again, 40%, it'll last about 3-4 days, the main smell. So like your third, fourth day, it'll drop significantly in the smell. Except for that, it would either, there are filters and that you can filter, can filters, which are charcoal filters. They'll take out the smell and everything. But if you don't want to invest, because it does become expensive, if you put it in your bathroom and you put that fan on, it'll just suck everything out and put it outside. So it'll be a negative from your house to your bathroom and then bring it out. But yes, unfortunately, you will have that danky terrific smell in your house for a few days.
Danky, terrific smell. So do you recommend using the bathroom? Is that something that you would suggest?
Honestly,
as long as you have more than one bathroom at least.
yeah.
Okay.
But I prefer it because it's one of the smallest rooms you have, so you can control your humidity a lot better.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's easy to clean because it's made for cleaning.
Mm-hmm. And you got that fan.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. So mainly for the first 3 days is when it's going to smell the strongest. Mm-hmm. And then for the following days afterwards, it does start to dissipate.
Yeah,
okay.
A little.
Okay, I mean, that's doable. It depends on, if you're planning on having family over for Thanksgiving or not. It'll depend a little bit on a few different factors, I'm sure. But actually, that reminds me of one thing that I saw recently at one plant in Barhaven. They had candles that were specific for pulling the scent of weed out of your air. So everything exists now that the cannabis industry has exploded, but there are literal candles for all you candle lovers out there. I'm a candle lover. There is a candle for that. There's apparently a candle for that. I saw them at one plant. You can hit that spot up, check them out. But we would suggest drying in your bathroom. I think that's a really good recommendation because a lot of bathrooms do, especially if you have a bathroom in the basement, probably no windows, also good. Because remember, you want to be drying in a dark space. So that's a really good point there. Good questions. What are some other questions that I had? I feel like, I wish I knew more things of what you could do with, these fan leaves. Someone had told me through our Instagram there, she was a holistic nutritionist, that those fan leaves, they of course don't contain THC. Not much, which is good for people that don't want that, right? There's people that want those THC benefits and other people who don't, which is fine. But there are still so many health benefits associated with this beautiful, wondrous plant that Mother Nature has gifted us. And these fan leaves are full of energy. So she had mentioned putting them into smoothies. I really want to try that actually. So maybe I'll give it a go and let you guys know how it works out to kind of greenify my smoothie a bit there. What about the stems?
They're essentially wood though. It ends up being...
There's no steeping it in tea and pulling anything out? I feel like I've heard that before. Is this a wise tale?
I've heard it too. I guess there might be a little taste and a little THC, but it is definitely the least medical part of the plant. Okay.
Now, what about when people have completely trimmed down their plant and basically all that's left is the main stem? Are you pulling that out, composting it? Are you trying to remove as much of the root system as possible so that you can prepare that garden bed for next year's growth?
If you're going to not change your earth and replant on the same spot, you can always, this is good for gray mold, but it's an enzyme, so it'll help break down whatever's left.
Okay.
So, and obviously churning the earth, breaking it down, would help, and it will compost if you're going to use the same exact earthen spot. And if not, you can burn everything, I guess.
Burn everything. Oh, we've got another question here from Barbara. Growing weed given to me, how do you distinguish between different types? That's a good question. So distinguishing between different strains, different types of weed that you might be growing, or you're not sure which one is which. I think it's really hard to identify a strain if you don't know anything about it. But go ahead. What is your thoughts on that?
Like you were saying, it's pretty hard. Honestly, the easiest thing would be to ask the person who gave them to you. And if they don't know, how
many times do you get that question? Do people send you pictures all the time? People send me pictures all the time of regular houseplants. Those are a lot easier to identify. But I'm sure people are sending me pictures now, oh, what strain is this? It's so hard, isn't it?
Honestly, they don't all look the same, but it's a weed plant. They all have the same leaf, fan leaf. They kind of all look the same. When it starts to flower, you might have different colors. The nodes might be a bit different and scattered instead of here it's all a cola. Instead, they might be scattered a bit more. But people have been switching the names of genetics for the last how many years?
And there's so many hybrids and crosses that I feel like it's so hard to keep track. There are variations in the fan leaves. I've noticed that's how I've kind of been able to differentiate my 4 plants. Okay, these 2 are definitely the same. This one's different, that one's different, by looking at the fan leaves. So if you're trying to maybe determine if you have two plants that are the same, looking at the families can be helpful.
Yeah, like it. Obviously, you can say if two plants are the same or if plants are different, but then to go and say, well, my plant that I don't know what it is like, let's say shark. That's even pushing it. I've been working with Gatineau for years, and I honestly have some trouble just taking a random plant and saying, is it really this one or not? They kind of look a little the same, unfortunately.
That's a tough one, yeah. So when you are harvesting your seeds or when you're germinating your seeds, make sure that you label them so that you keep track easily. We have another question here from Garden Time. Do you have any tips for growing auto-flowering plants? I'm interested in auto-flowering because basically the growth cycle is a lot shorter, right?
Yeah.
It's like half.
Flowering flowers. It has something to do also with the size of your pot.
Okay.
I personally don't like autoflowers.
Why is that?
You can't control it. You can't control the size, and it's a little less natural. I mean, flowers aren't supposed to be autoflowers. They're supposed to have a male, a female, and they're supposed to be off photosynthesis. So they were a bit switched somewhere in their evolution, and they're not usually as nice looking at the end. They don't have that. They don't become as big, as tight as the same strain that would not be autoflowered. I just personally don't prefer it.
Okay. Any tips for growing them? Is it trying?
You can literally leave them 24-hour lights, and because they're autoflowers, again, it's not auto photosynthesis, so they will switch when they get to that maturity. So you can, but it's always good to leave a little dark. So usually it's an 18-6 in veg and 12-12 in flower, but that autoflower can be 24-hour daylight and it will still flower. But it's just, at least we'll give it a little darkness because that's when the plant actually grows. It's during the night.
Okay, interesting. Interesting. I hope that helped answer your question, Garden Time. Great. We actually have had so many questions about autoflowers, buying feminized seeds. We had another person message us saying how they had basically harvested all the seeds from their plants last year and were trying to figure out a way to determine whether or not the seeds were feminine or not before actually germinating. And I actually had someone who works with us, Mary Jane Kelly, shout out, who was a seed analyst for like years and years for the government. And she actually said that that was something that she was to do, it was part of her job, was she was able to determine. Yeah.
Not a lot of people can do that.
Sharp eye. Mary Jane, if you're out there, you're the best.
That's awesome, actually.
Yeah. Oh, you guys would have such a great chat. And her name is Mary Jane. Like her name is MJ, so she's the best.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So she said that there was a way there, but yeah, I've never tried autoflowers. I've been interested in what it's all about, but I kind of come back to that same thing that you've mentioned, in that they are so genetically modified, and there's something about that just kind of doesn't sit well with me. I'm like, we just try to harness nature too much, and it just kind of creeps me out. It doesn't sit well with me. That's all I can say about it. But you know what? Do your own thing. They exist for a reason. Autoflower all you want. Lots of sunlight, says Philippe. So we will start to wrap this up. If there are any more questions, please do leave them in the comments and we will go through and answer them ourselves. You're free to also slide into our DMs and ask any cannabis growing related questions that you might have. Here, Teragenic Solutions is on the Quebec side at 76 Rue Lois.
Yes.
Yes.
Unit 9.
Unit 9. We're going to link all of that information below in our YouTube video, and we'll also make that available on our Facebook page so that you're able to find Philippe and this amazing store. Him and his staff are so knowledgeable. They're just full on ready to educate you on how to best grow your crop. So thank you so much for joining us. Again, I'm Emma from the Urban Botanist. We loved having you here. We're going to be sending out our prize pack winners. And stay tuned, we might be giving away a couple more things. Thank you again. We hope you have a great rest of your Sunday and happy growing.